So I want to get your take on this. With the Fed continuing to raise rates, do you think people in our profession are under the fire? And what do you think that actually means? What does a recession actually mean? We all know it's coming.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we're in a recession. I think we've been in a recession. I think by the time that they formally admit that we're in a recession, we're probably coming out of the recession. So which tells me, hey, listen, if we're, I think we've probably been in a recession for 4 to 5 months. So what does that mean? Well, if it's a shorter term recession, then we're probably halfway through it. If it's a longer recession, then maybe you have double, what we've already been through. But the reality is, I think, yeah, we're in a recession. It's going to mean, a recession by definition is what? 2 quarters of lower GDP, right? Negative growth in the economy, which we saw in Q1 and Q2. Q3 is basically pulled us out, and now it's positive or whatever. But the reality is, a recession means slower growth, and so slower growth, deceleration in prices, whatever you want to look at, it's going to be slower out there with regards to housing. It's going to be slower out there with regards to the number of transactions. We've already seen that. The number of transactions happening in a lot of areas is down considerably. In fact, I'm talking to somebody tonight in the Florida market. There, the number of transactions down there where she is in Tampa is like 37%. So a third. It's 2/3 of what it was. I think that's going to continue with the rates higher like this. It has more of an impact than home prices actually correcting a little bit more, just because that interest rate has such a big impact on your monthly payment. And so I think that means that there's going to be, quite frankly, there's going to be some agents that get out of the business. I mean, a couple months back, we were at the highest number of licensed practicing real estate agents in the country. And I think it was like 1.5 million or something along those numbers. And if you've been in this business for any period of time, you know that when the times are good, the number of people getting licensed goes up, because the barrier to entry is pretty much, can you talk? And you got to be able to talk to be an agent. So everybody gets licensed. So I think there's going to be less agents out there. And the professionals in this market are the ones that do well and continue to prosper. I mean, the old Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule is going to be more pronounced over the next, 6 months to a year, in my opinion, maybe even a little bit longer. Whereas instead of the top 20% doing 80% of the business, it's probably going to be the top 5% doing 95% of the business, just because of that. And the media, again, like we know, and I'm even guilty of it in some regards, using headlines and that sort of thing to get attention. But they're there to get clicks on articles. And they're going to use the term recession. They're going to use, the negativity without any real context as to what it means to drive eyeballs to their content. That they're good for that. And like you said, there's not a lot else to talk about at the moment, until we find out who the presidential candidates are, at which point that will be a focal point. But either way, recession is going to be in the mainstream media, and I think it's going to impact everything around us, and more so in a slowing fashion. It's not going to happen immediately. It's not going to be a crash and burn. It's just going to be a gradual. You continue to see people drop away from the business, both on the mortgage and real estate side. And where it ends, it's hard to say.
It's so interesting to hear that, because again, it goes back to whether it's local or, what locale you're in. So for example, if you're in California or Colorado, I'm assuming that real estate agents, so let's talk about the real estate agents for one part of it. They're making it more difficult to get your real estate license, where places like Texas, I don't think they care. I don't think they've ever really cared. So it's kind of required that the agents that are in Texas, if they want to do well, and then they have to educate themselves so that they can educate their clients, right? Where some of the other locations, there's so many stipulations that they're forced into being able to educate. Maybe they can't keep up, and then they kind of fall by the wayside. But yeah, I do agree that we'll lose a substantial amount of realtors, and the Pareto principle will shift in this case.
Well, what's interesting too, if you're looking at things right now, you're looking at the fact that Facebook has announced 13 or 18% reduction in
Large
staff,
reduction.
right? It was 11,000 jobs. I did a video the other day saying it was 2. It ended up being, I think it's 11 out of 87,000 employees. You have Apple here locally that's deciding not to bring on certain. I put a video out this week about it. Apple was supposed to, I think, hire 10,000 employees. They got to 6, and now they have a hiring freeze. Apple actually, a representative for Apple said that's not true, but who knows? I mean, I would imagine a lot of these people are a lot of these tech companies are having to reduce. I mean, if you think about it this way, this is what's happening, right? When the Fed increases the rate, the process and the cost to get money from one bank to another or from an individual that's trying to raise capital becomes harder. So when you have a harder time raising capital to keep things floating, you have to lay people off, right? That's the biggest line item on anybody's budget is payroll. So they're going to have to drop payroll. And so that's what we're seeing. The question is, as we're heading into this recession, how massive are the layoffs? Are they to the 2008 standard, right? Do we get back to that where now, I mean, one thing we haven't seen, and I'm curious to hear from you on this, Jeb. So we haven't seen yet. I know a lot of people are talking about there's an increase in foreclosures, but that's really an increase in foreclosure notices. It takes a while to foreclose.
Yep.
So we're not going to see any foreclosures really until, if this thing really kicks off, maybe June next year, July.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I read something from Black Knight, I don't know, a week or so ago, and I don't remember the number specifically, but we're still under the number of defaults that we were prior to coming into the pandemic. So we're actually less defaults now prior than right when we went into the pandemic. And a lot of the foreclosures that are actually happening at the moment are people that were in default headed into the pandemic. They just got the benefit of rolling into a time where there was different forbearance options and different moratoriums where they were literally locked in their homes and nothing was going to happen. And those are the people that are defaulting. Now, does that mean that more people aren't going to default? No, it doesn't at all. I mean, I think with recessions and with layoffs and that sort of thing, you're going to have people laid off. I mean, the latest report again from Black Knight came out, I think yesterday, the day before, and said that in the third quarter, that home buyers lost $1.3 trillion in equity, $1.3 trillion. And that sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. But then
Can you believe I had that article ready to go for you to say that?
There you go. And then you go read the report, and in the report somewhere, in the report, it says the average homeowner still has like $90,000 in equity in their house. That's an average across the United States. So yeah, 1.3 trillion lost is a lot of money lost. But then when you spread it out over, the total population of the US, people still have a decent amount of equity. And I think we've, in my opinion, seen a lot of the pullback in prices that we're probably going to see. I mean, if you were a seller and you didn't sell already, what's your motivation to sell now? It was, I guess, maybe if you were waiting and thought things were going to improve and you were going to sell, but I don't know. Prices are sticky to the upside. And in this case, I think more so just because so many homeowners have locked in such a low interest rate. So I think that keeps defaults at a low. As for, layoffs and that sort of thing, I think the unemployment rate in the last crash was like over 12%. We're currently at 3.7% unemployment. And is that number incorrect? Maybe to some regard, maybe it's a little bit higher than where it is currently. But I do believe that if we see an unemployment rise, again, that gives the Fed an opportunity to at least pause what they're doing and should bring inflation down. With less people working, less money spending, recession happening, all of these things that we talked about means less money circulating the economy, which means in theory, inflation numbers should come down some. And we know that interest rates follow inflation. So, there's a lot of moving pieces here, and it's really hard to say that, hey, this happens, which means this happens. And so there's just too many things that play off one another. But I do believe that at some point, probably within the next 6 months, we see inflation numbers come down, substantially from 8% where we're sitting now. In fact, we get a report tomorrow, and in turn, that really should be lower just because of the year over year, how they calculate inflation, which should show that inflation is actually going down. But I don't think we've truly seen the result of what the Fed is doing with raising the Fed funds rate because of the lag that they've talked about. And so I think once that lag truly kicks in, that's when you start to see numbers.
Do you think they raised too quickly then?
I do. Yeah, I think so.
Thanks for watching this short of the Real Amigos podcast. For more live streams, hit here. For more clips, hit here. We'll catch you on the next one.